And we are live. Welcome to the Pitch Masterclass today with myself, Ray Gibson from Funded.club, and David Beckett. Welcome, David.
Very happy to be here, Ray.
This is great. I first met you in October 2014.
Yeah, time
which
has
we were
flown.
just saying before we went live. It seems weird to say that out loud.
Yeah.
I guess we've both gained some experience and a few more grey hairs since then.
Yes, very much so.
You were, frankly, an inspirational speaker on the selection days of Startup Bootcamp, where my startup was participating. It was a real privilege to see you on stage that day. We learned a lot. I felt you were someone we should really follow, and we ended up working together.
Yes.
We had the pleasure of being coached by yourself one-to-one for our demo day presentation, which was a big success. Thank you for that. And we've been impressed ever since. Since then, you've trained more than 2,000 startups, or coached more than 2,000 startups.
Yeah.
33,000 professionals, including the likes of Netflix, PwC, Booking.com, and many others. And you're the author of Pitch to Win. Go and find that on Amazon, everybody. So what we plan to share today is how to open conversations with investors, get them hooked, and a lot more. If you're watching live, you can put questions in the chat and we will pick those up as we go along. If you're watching this back, and a lot of people do, then do send us a direct message on LinkedIn or wherever you want to find us, and we will follow up that way instead.
For sure.
So I'll turn it over to you, David. Feel free to share your links and websites so people know how to get to you.
Right.
But if you could lead the way here, I think you've got a deck to share or some slides as well.
So thanks again, Ray, for having me here. I'm David Beckett, everybody. I'm a pitch coach, and I believe that great ideas need a voice. And as Ray mentioned, I've been working with startups for the last, more than a decade now, and coached more than 2,800 startups. And between them, they've nearly reached the $500 million in investment. And I never say that's because of me. It's actually about the work that they're doing, the amazing stuff that they're creating, and the change that they're bringing. Equally, what I see is that startups have a never-ending double-sided challenge. That double-sided challenge is, first, you're presenter, you've got the pressure of public speaking. You want to convince people to come on board, believe in what you're doing, and help you get to the next step, whether that's investment or introductions or helping you along the way. And so that's a big enough pressure. That's something that causes a lot of people to get nervous. Then you add time pressure. Startups have to tell in 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and that combination causes people's brains to fry. So my job is to help people make a good plan about what we're going to put in the pitch, and indeed what we're going to take out of the pitch, so that we're clear on what's going to resonate with this audience and make good decisions about what to put in it, and indeed build a story that we feel certain of and confident about, so that we come away from the pitch feeling like, okay, I did my job. I'm happy with this pitch. This went really well. That's my job, is to help those startups build that story. And I think the basic situation that most people experience when they're presenting is this. So when we're the pitcher, we have finally got that meeting. So for example, you're going for an investor or a customer. You've been trying to get that meeting, and after some weeks of chasing around, we finally get a 30 minutes. So we think to ourselves, okay, I'm going to give them the whole story. We'll give them the story A to Z. The more they understand, the more that they will be convinced, right? So we get ready for a 20, 25-minute presentation. Then there's the other side of it, the person who's listening, whether that's an investor or a customer. The fact is, everybody's really full and busy. And so here's the investor thinking, this is the 6th pitch meeting of the day. I really hope we can just get to the point quickly. I just need to know whether this is in line with our interests, and then we can go in the details later. I just want to find out the essentials. And I think that gap is the constant situation, whether you're pitching to investors or customers. And again, my role is to help you make good decisions about, how do I package my story to adapt to the fact there's no time, people are not ready for complexity, but they want to know the really essential stuff. So I'm going to focus on a few quick essentials, the things that will capture people's attention, especially investors, but also customers.
Fantastic.
And so my job is bring these two groups together. And as I said, great ideas need a voice. Probably in the world right now, it's a time when we need new ideas to make change more than ever. My goal is to help people shine when it really matters. So what I want to share with you is, and there's many things we can talk about on pitching, but I just want to spend 3 or 4 minutes talking about what I've learned from investors, talking about meetings with startups. And I think what I'm going to share with you applies to customers and lots of different situations when we're pitching. And I want to focus on what goes wrong in the first couple of minutes of a pitch. So again, picture that moment. You've got a meeting and we go in all guns blazing. So what goes wrong in the first 2 minutes? I've spoken to many investors about this, and what they tell is too much history, too much product, and too long a story. Now, the numbers on investors taking, say, a first meeting and a second meeting are somewhere around a 90 to 92% drop off. And I've spoken to various investors, and that seems like a good number. So if someone takes 100 meetings, they will get about 10 second meetings. Now, why don't they get to the next one? Too much history, too much product, too long a story. Let me give you just a quick example. Someone says, okay, what have you got for us? And they say, well, we started our company in 2019, and yeah, it was me and a couple of friends. And yeah, so we started, and then 6 months after that, we got our first seed funding. Yeah, then one of the founders left. But well, anyway, you get the picture. The history is there, but that's not the thing that's going to trigger them. Or we immediately start going into product, technology, and everything takes a long time. So what is happening in those first 2 minutes? And this was pretty much summed up by one of the team at Peak Capital in Amsterdam. He said, I put the startup into one of 3 mental buckets in those first 2 minutes. And those buckets are exciting, tell me more. Okay, that's where we want to be. Then there's the maybe, let's see. And then there's the no, not for me. And it's really difficult to get out of those last two and jump into the first one. We're either in that first one in the first 30 seconds, 1 minute, or we're out. So how do we get into that exciting tell me more bucket? Well, you can fix what goes wrong by giving them your best stuff. Not the history, not every detail of the product, but your best stuff. Now, when it comes to investors, I think there's 4 things that they really want to know as soon as possible in the pitch. And that is these 4 things: huge unsolved pain. And I mention huge because that's about quantifying the pain. Now, we don't have to go into all the TAM, the SAM, and the SOM and all of that stuff at this stage. We just need a marker on how big is this thing? How many organizations, how many people, how many drivers, how many accountants, how many, whatever it is that we're addressing are experiencing this problem. And then what are they losing? This much time, this much cost, it's this much waste, this much energy is being wasted, whatever it is, and how much. So they're looking for huge unsolved pain. Then I've chosen the phrase decent product very carefully, because whether we like it or not, they're not so interested in the details of the product. Products will change. What they want is a huge unsolved pain and a demonstration that you can create something that looks like it solves that in a pretty decent way. What they're more interested in is your progress. Now, traction is great. If you're already in business, then tell them, don't be humble. Tell them what you're selling, who you're selling to, how much you're growing, and so on. If you're not already in business, then talk about validation. What have you done to engage with customers that gives them the feeling customers are waiting for this product? And then the 4th thing is the amazing team. And this is challenging because you've got to tell one thing that really stands out about that team. Now, probably you've got 2 or 3 minutes to cover this. And just to give an idea about how much that is, it's about 25 sentences. So it's handy to know how much you can tell. You can tell about 9 sentences, 8 to 9 sentences per minute. You've probably got 2 or 3 minutes if you focus on these things to capture their attention. So 25 sentences. So if you think about your own business, how would I explain that? And we've really just got to get to the essentials, not all the details, but the essentials. Now, I think there's a bit of a difference when it comes to customers. I'll just briefly touch on that, and then let's open up for discussion and questions. Because I think customers are looking for something slightly different. What they're looking for is they're not so interested in the team. Investors are always interested in the amazing team. They want to know who's behind it. For customers, the thing that they really want is, do you understand their pain? Have you got something unique and proof that it works, so that they're in the hands of people who have done this before? So if you're pitching to a big international company, if you can demonstrate that you understand the problems that these international companies are having and that you've done this before with those kind of companies, then you have a strong chance of capturing their attention. So these are the things that I think make a lot of difference. And I think especially recognizing that people are full, that they're full of meetings, full of information, and they're not 100% focused on the pitch. So we need to give them the stuff that is of maximum interest to them at the beginning. Ideally, they say, well, this sounds amazing. How do you do that? Okay, once you get into the how do you do that, then you can go further in the details and you can get in a conversation, get in the discussion about the business. So those are the main things I wanted to share just initially. I will close the slide share.
That's a great start. One of the things I remember you coaching me on was putting more of myself into the story.
Yes.
To personalize it. Would you say that should come early as well, or that would be more detail later on, the why and why me, why now?
Yeah. So this is, I think, a kind of an add-on to that initial part, and it can relate to the problem that you're solving. So I've been thinking a lot about this. I think founders are basically going into 2 categories. There are the ones who have a personal connection to the problem that they're solving, and there's the ones who aren't.
Right.
And for better or for worse, generally investors are more positive to those who have got some kind of a personal motivation, a personal connection to the problem. And I mean, take yourself, Ray. You were bringing a new way to help customers or help people apply for jobs. And your story was about having gone through this process for years and years, and it taking time, it's kind of frustrating. The tools weren't brilliant, and bringing a new technology to change that industry. Now, that is a perfect way to introduce it, because you've got genuine experience, you've experienced the frustration, and then you're motivated to make that change. So I think if you've got that kind of story, you can bring that into the part of the huge unsolved pain and tell that story. What it also does is it buys you a little bit more time. The 2 minutes extends to a little bit more, because people are ready to listen to that story if you're connected to if it's relevant to the business.
I guess as long as it doesn't become your life story, for your earlier point, don't drag it out, but keep to the essentials. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see which questions come in from the audience here. Could we ask about common pitching mistakes? You've been very good at coaching people for pitching on stage. I'm also curious about pitching on screens in this kind of setting. What are the pitfalls that people fall into nowadays, either on stage or on video?
So I think, actually, I've got another couple of slides which are kind of relevant on this. I think the first thing is actually not doing this, focusing on who's your audience and what do they care about, what do they already know. And that's regardless. Well, I'll touch on the online part in just a moment. But I think in general, this seems so obvious. Think about your audience. But what do we actually mean by that? We need to think about, especially if we're talking to customers, what's really on their mind? What's the biggest challenge for them? Is it understanding your product or solving this problem, saving time, saving costs? Maybe it's even that individual in the company that you're pitching to who has a problem. So we need to identify what that is. So we steer the pitch towards that person. I think is firstly, not thinking enough about the audience and talking too much about here's what we do.
Right.
So that's the first thing. And I think the other thing I always recommend people to get clear on is what's the objective? What do you want people to do as a result of the pitch? The worst case is that we either end a meeting, or if you're at a pitch event where, say, you've got a pitch for 3 minutes, and we get to the end and we think, oh, that's great, fabulous. Then the next pitch starts and it's kind of gone. So we need to have some kind of a clarity on what should they do as a result of the pitch. So these are two things I really strongly recommend anybody is get clear on who's the audience and what do they care about, what level of technology and terminology are they at, so that you can speak in their language. And secondly, what do you want the people to do? Now, I think the other thing, let's pick up on the online part. If you've got a meeting with an investor or indeed a customer, I think I did various research on this, and we need to make sure that there are check-ins with the audience, the person that you're pitching to, every few minutes. So the temptation is do a long presentation, then Q&A. My recommendation is cut it into pieces, 1 to 2 minutes, maybe less. Any question, anything on your mind? Then, okay, on to the next piece. Any questions from your side? Is it clear? We worry about that. We think, what if they don't have any questions? But they also need a bit of time to process it. So I think that's a very common thing for online pitches, just broadcast too much.
Right. Which relates to something you mentioned about attention spans. You've got some data on DocSend and things like that, which is probably related also to attention span in an audience, in a theatre or in a room.
Yes. So there's various research. There's a classic, we have a shorter attention span than a goldfish, which is not strictly true. There was some psychological research that was done on can people focus on a task. And in 2004, that number for how long people could focus was 150 seconds. I'll give you a moment to think. Anyone who's listening, just think, how much is it now? In 20 years, what did it go down from and to? So that number is 47 seconds. So it's dropped by 2/3. Now that's the first thing. It's phenomenal. And just in 5 years, DocSend's research is that 5 years ago, 2019, investors read pitch decks for 3 minutes 44 seconds. Now it's 2 minutes 24. So again, that's like a third drop or quarter drop in 5 years. So I think no matter who is presenting what, any idea in today's world, the need to make it short is just a continual pressure.
And these are folks who are literally invested in the conversation, in listening. It's their job to listen to these. So breaking it up into 1 or 2 minute chunks is certainly really good advice.
That works.
So they're along for the ride with you.
Yes.
What about style? So presentation style, body language, use of voice, dealing with nerves. Are there any tips you could give there as well?
Yeah, definitely. So my method is always get the story straight first. And really work through the story. Get really sure of your story, because that highly influences how well you present the thing. And it's not everything, but you're much more likely to have more natural body language, more convincing body language if you're certain of your story. So that's like the basis. But that doesn't mean that the story will come across as you want it to. So we have to think about a few things. I think, again, let's think about the online situation, because it's so common for people, for pretty much everybody. When you have I'm often asked, should you use hand gestures, for example, online? Thing is, people can't see them much, but what it does is it causes you to have more emphasis when you use hand gestures. So if you say, there's 3 things I need to tell you, and the first one is this, or you say, there's 3 things I need to tell you, the first one is this, you naturally just put more emphasis on. You can't help it. So I think gestures are useful in face-to-face and online, and especially online, because voice is really the only thing you've got in terms of enhancing the content through your own body language and voice. Voice is a big influence. And then having emphasis on the words that matter, having emphasis on the messages that matter. These are the things that are important. So I think though the gestures help, and especially face to face, of course, you want to think about how am I going to emphasize the messages that I really want them to understand. These definitely make a lot of difference. I think also there's I'm a fan of practical things that people can do, but the only mindset thing that I'm really a big fan of is just, it's an opportunity, right? If we get a chance to pitch, it's a chance. If we get a chance at a network event and so on. Sometimes I see people a bit like, got to get this pitch done, but yeah, it's an opportunity. So let's embrace it and take it on, do the work, and tell that story.
I think there's also some technical hygiene that goes along with a video pitch as well. Just closing all your other windows and focusing on one screen, because there's so many things coming at us on our laptops now. You might have Slack open and it's pinging, your phone might be pinging, emails going on, might be things crashing in the dev environment. Who knows? I think you have to treat it like you've really sat down with someone for coffee and nothing else is happening for those minutes. Because they can tell if you're distracted, right?
I agree. I think closing all the tabs, getting your video on, and showing up actually. And
there you go. That's the right way to say it.
And as you say, it does the technical stuff. I mean, most of us have been through the whole process of like we all started in a bedroom or a box room or something with stuff everywhere, and have worked out virtual backgrounds or other ways. But still, it's good to have decent lighting so they can see your face, and level at height of the camera and so on, so that it's you're able to look at the people. These are simple things, but they make a difference, I think.
Yeah, we see this when we're interviewing candidates as well. If they're very distracted and lacking focus, it's not a good sign. They're also going to do that in the job on their daily stand-ups. And we want to look into someone's eyes and know, okay, they are present. We are actually in a conversation.
Yeah.
That's good.
Shall I close this screen, Ray? Shall I take this?
Yeah, sure.
Off. Yeah. I'll.
I have a couple of follow-up questions in case if people write in, then we can still cover those. But thinking about the different stages of investment, seed, Series A, Series B, do you see any differences there in presentation style, different emphasis on different types of content, for example?
Yeah, very much so. I think once you get in the seed stage, you might have traction, but early stage traction. So you've got some kind of proof of in terms of sales, but it's limited. So we've got to pitch the opportunity, we've got to pitch the team, we've got to pitch more on how we've started to discover whether customers are engaged with this concept. And of course, whatever traction we manage to build. I think once you get to Series A and beyond, it's much more about proof and demonstrating, firstly, that customers are in, that the business is growing, and that people are that there's take up, and secondly, of course, a question of scaling. The scalability message in the seed round is important, but it's still a bit theoretical. What we actually want to get to is basically really good product market fit and get some traction running. But once you've got that, okay, how big could this thing go? And then scalability in terms of either different markets, different countries, different product segments, new industries for the same technology. that part comes in. I also think, interestingly, the personal story as such is less a part of the pitch, but the people are as important as ever. The team is important. So it's a bit less of a, the personal motivation, and a bit more on what kind of qualities do you have as a team, which elements you're missing, what might you need to add, have you got a clear plan about how you're going to do that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So one last question about AI. All talks need to have an AI section these days. So how are things changing? It used to be, hipster, hacker, hustler was the the three co-founders, or the three musketeers, to make something happen. Do you see this the same way? You've lived through a lot of pitches on stage recently at various events. Are you seeing more solopreneurs or AI augmented teams, or what's your read on that these days?
I think from the founding team, at least at this stage, I haven't seen that much of a change.
Okay.
And I still think that the investors are looking for a group of founders. What I think is realistic is that when you're building up the team using AI tools, AI agents, and so on, to replace just hiring more people, that is clearly a direction. And but it's still early stage. We tend to live in a bit of a bubble of when I look at my LinkedIn feed, for example, it's packed with AI agent stuff. But for the average person in business, that's not necessarily the case. Now, of course, for startups and investors, they are in that bubble, but still, it's not quite as far down the line as in application as perhaps we might think. But like classic cliche on this stuff is, we overestimate the impact on the short term, underestimate the impact on the long term. Probably within a year or 2 years, it'll be much more likely that solopreneurs will be more acceptable. But today, I still wonder, though, because in the end, the reason why investors want a team of founders is risk, or rather de-risking. If there's a group of people, you're spreading your risk. If somebody drops out, 2 more people are there, and they'll pick up the reins and they'll bring in another person. So I think that might continue to be the case in the future, because one founder driving the thing, it's a risk.
Yeah, I've heard a few people talking about pitch decks they've received, and they discover there's a string of these that are worth, between 1 and 10 million, and the products have been stood up within just a few days using AI to code them, and then a pitch deck, and it goes out. So perhaps going back to the beginning of this conversation, talking about the team early can be a differentiator to all of that going on right now.
I think so, yeah. And I think it's difficult when you have to talk about the team, because you've normally not got enough time to properly tell about it. But I think the best advice is to find one thing that is really great about the team. And that might be complementary skills, it might be experience, might be past exits, for example, or whatever it is that makes them very specifically the right team to make this business succeed. And it's useful to think of skills, experience, and character.
Yeah.
And when you look on those 3 and try and come up with a 2-sentence, 3-sentence description of why this team is the right one, skills, experience, character, that can be a differentiator, definitely. It can hook them to think, oh, that sounds interesting. Tell me more about these people.
Yeah. Excellent. I'll close on one piece of advice that stuck with me from yourself. You mentioned in this conversation, good stories need a voice.
Yes.
You've also said that voice needs practice and training, and you have to talk your way into a good pitch. Did you want to expand on that as a closing comment?
Yeah, very much so. I think what we tend to do is we start typing. We type at slides, and while we're typing, we think about what we're going to say. So we feel like, okay, I know what I'm going to say because I've typed it and I've been thinking about it while I'm making my slides. Problem is, it can be like pitch karaoke. And I know you're a good singer, Ray, because I've seen you and see you play, but I'm not. And what might sound fabulous in my head as a song, when I start singing, it doesn't sound good. And I would have to practice a lot to get anything like half decent. And it's the same with a pitch. We think it sounds like this, but when we speak, it sounds like that. And that might not be the way we wanted to hear it. So we need to, in advance, verbalize the pitch, especially new stuff, where we say it out loud and we think, hang on, that's not the words I would normally use in a conversation. That's more like what I've written. What would I say instead? Am I going to say, are we executing a high level strategic plan? Or am I saying we've got a brilliant plan, we're going to make it happen by the end of the year? That's it's more direct language. And the more you verbalize and speak it out loud and talk about the things that you talk about, verbalize what you're working on and talk with other people, and then package that into the story, the more natural it will be. So yeah, definitely talk yourself into a great pitch.
That's a good last tip. Yeah, it shouldn't be the first time you talk to an investor shouldn't be the first time this has been verbalized or vocalized. Because you can self-correct a pitch just hearing it in a room on your own. You say, oh, that sounds awful. And you can do several iterations of that before anyone else hears it.
Yeah, so, pitching to the cat will already improve it.
Yeah. And that passes the mom test, but that's another story.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. David, where can people find you to follow up?
Yeah, my website is best3minutes.com. They can find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy. If you look for a pitch coach on YouTube, you'll find me. So just type in pitch coach, and in the top 3 videos, you'll find me. So yeah, but best3minutes.com is best3minutes.com.
Fantastic. And we're at Funded.club. You can find us there, or also on LinkedIn, Ray Gibson. Thanks again, David, for joining us, and I wish you success.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.